Hi almal, dis Juffrou Nagel en vandag doen ons Vila se kind die derde bedryf. So we're doing the third act, and just to recap where we sort of ended in the second act is that like Lucas slash Benjamin is living with the Van der Wen family in the bush now, and although Vila has been trying to make contact with him, been trying to at least see him again, the magistrate told her that if you try to do that, I'll like lock you up, or he sort of threatened her, and she does go to the Van der Wen family to drop off some of like Lucas slash Benjamin's clothes. But Lucas isn't there at the moment. He's in like the bush. He's busy working. And Elias just takes the things. And when Lucas gets back, Elias basically says, like, if I had dogs, I would say dogs on Fila. So yeah, that's sort of where we ended. So die derde bedryf toneel 1. So the first scene. Black Boss. 'n paar jaar het verloop. Lucas is nou 19 en Nina 17. So there's been a 7-year time jump because now Lucas is 19 and Nina 17. I remember the last time like we left off when Lucas was taken away from Langekloof was when he was 12 years old. Lucas en Nina loop deur die bos want Nina gaan op die dorp werk. Lucas op band. Die boswagter het kom sê dat hy vir Nina werk op die dorp gekry het vir 4 shillings die week en kos en klere daarbey. So Lucas and Nina, they're walking through the bush. And it's because remember, like in Act 2 as well, Elias actually asked the Boswachter if he knows about any jobs for his daughter to please let him know. So now the Boswachter has gotten a job for Nina. She's going to work in town. She'll be getting 4 shillings a week. And she will be getting like food and clothes as well. En B, Nina wil nie op die dorp werk nie, sy wil in die bos bly. So this is quite important, like Nina does not want to leave the bush. She does not want to go and work in town. And it is maybe important to ask why. If her dad is so abusive and the environment in the bush is not that like nice, why does she want to stay there? And the main thing is it's because Nina loves nature. Nina loves the birds, Nina loves the trees, she loves the animals. So she just loves nature and that is why she wants to stay in the bush. Jy's dom. Ek wil liewerster 700 keer weg uit hierdie bos uit, waar daar ten minste bloute en son bo my kop is. So it just says here, like Lucas says, you know, you are stupid. I would much rather live somewhere outside of the bush where you at least can see the blue sky and the sun above your heads. And this idea of the space in the bush being like very dark is important to think of like a little bit later on when we contrast the spaces that we've seen in the story. Ek is nie anders 'n kinderoppasser nie. Dis beter as balke werk. En die geld is nie myne nie, dis pa se. So Nina just says like she's no one else's babysitter, so that's what she's going to do in town. And Lucas just says it's better than the labor that they're doing in the bush, like cutting the beams and getting everything ready, working with the wood and stuff like that. It's quite intensive labor. But Nina also says, you know, and the money is not hers, the money is her dad's. So basically what's going to happen is like every week or what, it's like so, one of the boys will from the bush will go into town and collect Nina's money. So this is very strange because although Nina's no longer living in the bush, her money is going to provide for the people in the bush. Ja. Nina sê dat Lucas nou kan omdraai. Sy sal alleen verder gaan na die boswagter toe. So this point Nina's like, Lucas, you can turn around. I'll go to the boswagter on my own. You don't need to worry. As ek hier omdraai, sal jy nie regtig diep valle toe loop nie. Nina, ek ken jou. Jy sal gaan wegkruip en môre oormôre trap die grootvoete jou of jy gaan dood van honger of jy breek jou bene of iets en dan slaan pa my dood. Ek wil nie op die dorp gaan werk nie, Lucas. Ek is bang. Ek was ook bang toe hulle my die slag Nysland toe gevat het. Ek wil hier in die bos bly. So Lucas is like, no, there's no way I'm going to do that because you will just probably like turn around, you'll stay in the bush and then if something happens to you, I'll get into trouble and dad will hit me. And she just is like, she's scared. She doesn't want to go and work in the bush, in town. And Lucas said when the first time he was taken to Nysna, he was also like really scared. And she just says once again, I want to stay here in the bush. Die dorpenaars spot met ons bosmense. Dis niks. Hou net jou kop in die lug. Die vrou wat my groot gemaak het altyd gesê, solank jou kop nie, sak jou hart ook nie. So it's just here, you know, one of the reasons as well is that Nina doesn't want to go to the town because the townspeople sort of tease the bush people because they essentially are very different. And there's a massive class jump between them. People living in the bush in general, they are very poor. And Lucas just says, don't worry about that. The woman who raised me, obviously referring back to Fila, always told me to keep my head up high, and then like your heart will be there with you. So sort of just saying like, you know, Fila always told him to be positive, regardless of the situation, or just know that eventually like a bad situation might end. En as ek wegloop van die dorp af, moet jy vir my keer as pa my wil slaan. So this is important. She basically says, when I walk away, you must please make sure that dad doesn't hit me too badly. So she tells us here she's gonna walk away. Black Sea. Now we are introduced to like a new space, a new ruimte. We are introduced to the ocean. Daar is bietjie van 'n tydsverloop en Lucas is alleen om te verhoog en die see is in die agtergrond. So there's like a small time jump here. It's not a big time jump. It's maybe like a month or so. And at this point, Lucas is alone on stage and the ocean is in the background. Lucas op band. Sy het weggeloop. Toe Christoffel weer 'n keer weg is om haar geld te loop haal, het hy sonder die geld by die huis aangekom, met die tyding dat Nina al langer as 'n maand weg is by die laaste mense waar sy gewerk het. Hy het gedink sy is terug bos toe. Nou moet ek haar loop soek, so Nina did walk away. And Christoffel went to fetch money from her again, and then when he got there, the people she worked with told them that Nina has been gone for a month. They thought she went back to the bush. So now Lucas has to go and look for Nina. Daar is 'n skare mense en party loop en ander hardloop en almal lyk baie opgewonde. Iemand sê vir Lucas dat daar 'n spookskip by Nutsi is en almal hardloop om dit te sien. So now at this point there's a lot of people around like Lucas and there's like a crowd. And this crowd, some of them are walking, some of them are running, and they're all running towards the same like little point and they all look very excited and someone just tells Lucas that there's like a ghost ship. Obviously not referring to like a ship with ghosts on it, but a ship that was like sort of abandoned that's at Nutsi and everyone's just going to see it. Lucas op band. Iets in my het vooruit begin loop. Watter verskil sou dit maak as ek sy draai? Watter verskil sal dit maak as ek Nina eers die volgende dag loop soek? 'n Spookskip was godsonmoontlik, maar ek wou gaan kyk. Miskien kan ek 'n slaapplek by Nutsi kry. By die waterkant het skemer die laaste nuuskieriges begin omjaag. Ek het agter teen die bosse bly wag tot die donker almal teen die koppe uitgejaag het. Almal behalwe een man wat langs die water bly staan het. So Lucas says like his recorded voice. Now the recorded voice is obviously we get their thoughts. So like individual characters' thoughts. So it's not something they're saying to anyone else. It's what they're thinking. So it's like their gedagtes, which is thoughts. And he just says something within him just moved forward. And the reason I've highlighted that is because it's really important to think back to when he was younger. He always loved being around water. He always built those small little boats and he played with it. So he's attracted to water. Something in the water like pulls him towards it. And he just said, if I just go there and I go and look at it and I just stay there a little bit, I only look for Nina the next day, it's not the worst thing in the whole entire world. And by night time, most of the people have left, but there's one guy that is still standing by the water. Die man wat nog daar staan is veldkornet Armstrong. Armstrong sê vir Lucas dat niemand weet wat of wie die skip is, wie se skip die is nie. In die oggend was dit net daar met geen mens aan boord nie. Armstrong sê daar is niks wat hulle kan doen om die skip te red nie. So this guy is Armstrong and he's just standing there and he just explains to Lucas that no one really knows whose ship this is or what the ship is or what the ship is for, because in the morning it was just there and there were no people on board. And at this point there's nothing they can actually do to save the boat. It's going to hit the rocks, it's going to crash against the rocks, fall into pieces, and there's really nothing they can do. Hy noem Mr. Ben wat die loods onder by die koppe is waar die skepe deurkom. Armstrong sê hy sal deur die nag oor die skip waak. So now it's just important he mentions Mr. Ben, who's another character we'll be introduced to soon. And Mr. Ben is like, I don't really know what you call it in English, but it's like those people that like tell the boats where to go, tell the boats to wait before they can go into like the little ports and dock and stuff like that. So Armstrong basically said to Mr. Ben that he will look after the ship in the evening, but in the morning it's Mr. Ben's problem, or not Mr. Ben's problem, but other people's problem as well, about realizing whose boat this is, why the boat is there, and stuff like that. Lucas sê vir Armstrong dat hy graag vanaand daar sal bly, en hy vra vir Armstrong of hy hom kan help waak. So at this point Lucas just tells Armstrong like, I would love to stay here, can I maybe help you just look after the boat? Wat kyk jy so aanhoudend in die lug op? Ek het lanklaas soveel sterre gesien. Kom jy dan uit die bos? Ja. Snaaks. Julle is mos nie mense wat met vreemdes gesels nie. So while Armstrong and Lucas is talking, Lucas keeps on looking up into the sky. And Armstrong's just like, why are you doing this? And he says, it's been a long time since I've seen so many stars. And this is obviously, once again, sort of important to realize with the spaces that, the bush is so like, like lush and it's so like closed that you can't actually see the stars above you. And this is where Armstrong just asks him, are you from the bush? And he's like, yes. And Armstrong just says that's funny because usually the people from the bush aren't very talkative. They don't really talk to strange people. And here Lucas he's talking to someone he doesn't know. Lucas op band terwyl die ligte uitdoof. As jy 'n ster sien skiet, moet jy vinnig wens. Dan kom jou wens uit, het Nina altyd gesweer. Nie dat daar bo Barnard se eiland veel sterre verskiet het nie. So he just says this on these, like, the little recorded voice says this while the lights are dimming out. Also, just remember, every time like the lights are dim out, it's indicating like a time shift or like a small time shift or a scenery shift. And he just said, in the bush, Nina always said, if you see a shooting star, you should make a wish and then your wish will come true. But he's like, not that there were a lot of stars that you would be able to see, or a lot of stars, shooting stars, above Barnardse Island, which is like the little place where they live in the bush. NB. So this is very important. Contrast tussen spasies. There's a contrast between the three main spaces that we get in this story. Okay? So in die lange kloof is dit oop en droog. So in the lange kloof it is open and dry. By die see is dit oop. By the ocean it is open. In die bos is dit dig en toe en donker. In the bush it is like lush, it is closed, and it is dark. And this whole idea of contrasting the open spaces to the closed spaces is almost also indicating figuratively that in the open spaces, Lucas can be himself, and Lucas enjoys being in the open spaces. But in the closed space, which is the bush, he is not experiencing a good time. Black Dorp, Miss Witherberry's house. So now there is just like an evening, like it sort of indicates that it's going from, the night to the morning. And he's now looking for Nina at Miss Witherberry's house in town. Lucas soek vir Nina by Miss Witherberry. Witherberry, werklik. Ongelukkig het die Nina van Rooyen wat in my diens is, geen familie nie. So he's at Witherberry and he's explaining, he's like, Nina van Rooyen, is she here? I'm her brother. And Witherberry's like, oh, that's interesting because the Nina van Rooyen who works for me said she has no family. Ek is Lucas van Rooyen, Nina se jongste broer. Ons was onrustig, want ons het gehoor sy is weg by die skoolmeester en het nie geweet waarheen nie. My pa het my gestuur om haar te kom soek. Nina het hier kom werk vra en ek het haar om 2 redes gevat. Ten eerste het ek hulp in die huis nodig. En ten tweede het ek gedink ek sou haar kon ophelp in die lewe deur vir haar goeie maniere te leer. Ek sal nie ontken dat sy fliks is in die huis nie, maar veel meer kan ek nie van haar sê nie. Die oomblik dat sy klaar is met haar werk en veronderstel is om met haar borduurwerk te begin, loop sy eenvoudig die koppe in en ek sit met die verantwoordelikheid as sy iets oorkom. So now Lucas just says, like, I'm Nina's youngest brother and, my dad sent me to look for her because she's no longer working with the schoolmaster. So it's obviously like maybe she helped take care of like the schoolmaster's kids or the kids at the school and her previous job. And Miss Witherberry just said like Nina asked her for work and she sort of took Nina in because of 2 reasons. The first one being that she needed extra help in the house. And the second one is that she thought she might help Nina in life. But she mentions that every time Nina's done with her work, and she does her work really well, in the house, she must do like small little tasks to make her like, I don't know, like a person, like a nicer person, a person with more manners, apparently. But then she would always go into like the hills and she would always go towards like towards nature, towards like, trees and stuff like that. And she's just like, Miss Witherberry said, then I'm sitting with the responsibility if something happens to Nina. Dis aan die bos wat sy vaslou, Miss Witherberry. Sy is baie lief vir die bos. Waarom moet sy dit dan bestry dat sy uit die bos kom? So now Lucas says the reason for that, the reason she goes towards the hills, the reason she goes towards like the trees and nature is because she is clinging to the bush and she loves the bush. But Miss Witherberry is like, that's pretty strange because why is she fighting against it? That is, she is from the bush. Like she doesn't want to be from the bush. Miskien. En in die vervolg sal ek self elke maand haar geld kom haal en met haar praat as dit nodig is. So this one just Miss Witherberry said like, or Lucas said maybe I can talk to Nina, and then I can convince Nina to stay here and not to do that, to stay safe with you. And he's like, yo, I'll probably do that, and then in the future I will come and fetch the money from her and I'll talk to her if it's needed. Waarom wil jy haar geld kom haal? Wel, dis eintlik my pa wat die geld laat haal. Jy kan nie sommer elke maand haar geld kom haal nie. Ek sal dit nie toelaat nie. U verstaan nie, Miss Witherberry. Bosmense is anders. Alles word saam in een hand gegooi. Nina is nie meer in die bos nie. Ek kan dus nie sien waarom julle nog haar geld wil hê nie. Ek ook nie eintlik. So at this point, Miss Witherberry is like, why would you come and fetch her money? And Lucas just says, it's not really me, it's my dad. And Miss Witherberry is like, I will not allow that. Like, this money is hers. And Lucas just says, like, ma'am, you don't understand. Like, bush people are different. We put everything together in one hand. But Miss Witherberry is like, Nina's no longer in the bush. Why does her money need to go to you? At this point, Lucas is also like, I don't actually even understand why. Nina verskyn agter Miss Witherberry. Nina also just like appears behind Miss Witherberry, so she probably heard that Lucas was talking to Miss Witherberry. Jy loop, sê nie jy het my gekry nie. Ek gee nie langer my geld af vir niemand nie. Paul kan sy gat oplig en vir homself werk. So yes, Nina, you go. Because at this point, she tells Lucas, don't tell anyone where I am. I'm no longer going to give my money to anyone else. And then she says something that's so important. Dad needs to lift his bum and he needs to do work himself. And we know this is like a trait of Elias, that he gets his kids to do the labor because he's always coming up with schemes, trying to come up with shortcuts, not really wanting to do the work but wanting to get rich really quickly. And Nina's like, he just needs to do the work himself. Ek het eintlik gekom om jou 'n guns te vra. Is jy siek, Lucas? Nee. Maar vir al die kere wat ek vir jou geskerm het, vir elke keer wat ek jou nie verklap het nie, en vir al die bas wat ek vir jou help afkap het, vra ek jou vandag net een keer se hulp. Wat? Gaan huis toe en gaan sê vir pa, ek kom nie terug nie. Ek is klaar met die bos. So at this point, Lucas is just, I actually just came to ask you a favor. And Nina's like, what? And she's like, remember all the times like I helped you and stuff like that, I covered for you. I'm just asking you for help this one time. And she's like, what do you want? And he says, go back home, go to the bush, and tell Dad that I'm not coming back. I'm done with the bush. So Lucas has had enough. So at this point, because the girls in my class also asked me, how does this work? So since she was Nina going back into the bush just to tell her parents something, she's still able to go away, and she doesn't need to tell her parents where she is. So it is like, sort of a visiting. If Nina goes back into the bush, and then she'll go back to where she has to go, where she's working. So die derde bedryf toneel 2, so the second scene. Black Sea Khalil's huisie. So we're still at the ocean, and now we're getting introduced to like a new character, which is Khalil, and he's like a guy who works close to the ocean, and he has a small little house close to the ocean. Middag. Ek soek iemand om my te leer roei. So this is just important when he goes there. He sees Khalil lives close to the ocean. And he also works for Mr. Ben, Khalil. So he asks, or he tells like Khalil that he's looking for someone to teach him how to row. Ja. Het jy 'n skei? Nee. Ek het gedink daardie een miskien. Vergeet van daardie een. Dis nie sommer net 'n skei nie. Dis die loodsboot, en oor hom slaan John Ben ons albei met een span dood. So he's just saying here that he wants, like, Khalil asks him, do you have like a small little boat that I can like teach you in? And Lucas says no, but I thought maybe that one, and he's showing towards one boat. But Khalil laughs and says no, that's like the loodsboat, so it's like the navigation boat when the bigger boats want to actually come into the port and dock. And he's like, it's John Ben. So John Ben is referring to Mr. Ben, who's like the loodsman, the guy who tells the boats where to go and stuff. Is John Ben die man op die kop? Ja. Ek het gesien jy was vanmôre daarbo by hom. Ek het gesien julle het gesels. Nie juis nie. Ek soek werk. Dan het jy by die verkeerde man loop vra en op die verkeerde tyd daarby. As die suidoos opstaan soos nou, is hy vroegdag al benee. Hy sou my gevat het as ek kon roei. Ag regtig. En hy het eers seker gesê hy soek 'n roeier vir Khalil September se span. So Lucas just asks, is the guy that sits like there on the koppie, which is like just a small little hill, is that John Ben? And Khalil says yes. And he's like, I saw you spoke to John Ben in the morning. And Lucas says he did, but he was just asking um for work. And John Ben basically told him that he would have taken Lucas if Lucas could row, if he knew how to like, do like rowing or row a boat. And Khalil's like, oh really? He probably told you that you can get Khalil September's like spawn, which is like the oar, I think. And Khalil obviously at this point, like Lucas doesn't know who he's talking to. He doesn't know that he's talking to Khalil. But Khalil September is a new character that we get introduced to. Khalil sê dat John Ben iemand soek om hom te vervang want hy wag vir 'n skip om weg te gaan. So this is important like at this point as well. Khalil says the reason John Ben's looking for someone else in his place possibly is because Khalil tells John Ben or says that John Ben's looking for someone to replace him because he's waiting for a ship to go away somewhere else. The important thing is that Khalil has been waiting for a ship for a very long time, like a very, very long time. So he doesn't just like have a ship that he can go onto. He's trying to get like the right ship. That's what he mentions, the right ship to get into or onto and then get away. NB, Lucas sê dat hy niemand anders se werk wil vat nie. Hy soek sy eie werk. So at this point, Lucas just says like, I don't want someone else's work or job. Like, I just want my own job. Ek wil nie klippe dra nie. Ek soek werk hier by die water en die skei. As ek na die klere aan jou lyf kyk, lyk jy vir my soos een wat uit die bos gekruip het. Ek kom uit die bos, ja, maar ek is klaar met die bos. Ek sal vir min geld en kos en blyplek werk en ek sal hard werk. Ek is gewoond aan hard werk. So Khalil just says like, do you really want to work for me? Like, so Khalil has a business sort of on the side just to make more money. But Lucas, at first, like, he mentioned something about, or like, no, sorry, is at this point, he mentioned something about working in town. And Lucas is like, no, I want to stay here close to the ocean. I want to stay here close to the small boats. And Lucas just says like, oh, Khalil says, if I look at your clothes, you look like someone that crawled out of the bush. And he's like, yes, I do come from the bush, but I'm done with the bush. And he actually says, I will work for very little money and food and a place to live, and I will work hard because I'm used to working hard. And we know in the bush, they are really used to working hard. Luister, geld het ek nie om jou te betaal nie, maar kos en blyplek het ek baie. As jy dalk vir my kom werk, wat se werk? Oesters uithaal, vis vang, vis skoonmaak en droog. Ek dog jy is 'n roeier. Ek is 'n roeier ook, maar ek sien nie kans om te leef van wat John Ben ons betaal nie. Ek maak my eie ekstra soos ek wil. Ek sal vir jou werk as jy my leer roei. So sorry, here's the thing about like Khalil. And Khalil says, if you want to work for me, it's like I need someone to go out, you go and catch like oysters, you clean the fish, you dry out the fish and stuff like that. And Lucas was just confused, like I thought you were like a rower, like I thought that was what you did. And he's like, I am one. And I do work for John Ben, but like I said before, sorry, like I just said a little bit too early. Like he can't just live from the money that he gets from John Ben. He has to make some of his own extra things as well. And Lucas just says, I will work for you if you teach me how to row, to do rowing. Lucas weet nie wat 'n koolvreter is nie. Dis 'n stoomskip sonder seile. So yeah, they're just talking about the different boats, and it just like the reason I just put this little part in is that at one point he talks about Lucas, also Khalil talks about like a koolvreter, which is like a coal eater. And Lucas has no idea what this is. And now it's important to remember, like, they have been in the bush so long. In the bush, they are kept away from so many things that are changing in the world. And in the bush, they sort of stay the same the whole time. They do everything the same. Nothing new really happens there. No new developments comes in there. And, Khalil just mentioned that it's a steamship. So obviously this means, like, times are changing. Things are becoming more modern. But because he was in the bush, he wouldn't know about that. Nina hardloop na Lucas toe. Sy gevoelens vir haar verander. Lucas op band. Haar lyf was teen myne en ek het myne voel antwoord gee. Was ek van my verstand af. So, here comes very like weird parts. But Nina's just running towards Lucas now. And he just says like his feelings towards her have changed because when she hugs him, and her body's against his body, he feels his body like responding to her body, and he was like, am I going crazy? Probably yes, because she's his sister. Lucas vra waar Nina was. Sy het ewe skielik net weggeloop by Miss Witherberry. So Lucas also asked Nina at this point where she was because she left Miss Witherberry, like when he went back there to like see her or visit her, she wasn't there. Maar jy het dan gesê ek moet vir Pa loop sê jy kom nie weer terug nie. Jy het my dan gestuur. Ek het toe maar net 'n bietjie langer in die bos gebly, dis al. So at this point, like Nina's like confused, like you told me to go back to the bush, you told me to go and tell Dad that you're not coming back, and she just said she just stayed in the bush a little bit longer. But a part that I sort of took out here is also just that she mentions that the bush has changed quite a lot. It's not the same, and I think it's just because she's not like the small little things, the instruments she made and stuff like that. It's all like rusty now because obviously she hasn't been there in a very long time. Nina, hy kan sy oë nie van haar weghou nie. Nina, jy kon nie meer as 2 maande in die bos gebly het nie. Waar was jy nog? I'm sorry, there's a spelling mistake. So Nina, and then he says he can't keep his eyes off of her. And he just tells Nina, like, you couldn't have been in the bush for more than 2 months. Like, where else were you? Ek het op die dorp gewerk, met 'n skuldige laggie. By die winkel waar ek die slag, die mondvletjie gesteel het. Ek werk nie meer daar nie. Ek het geloop. Daar kom te veel snaakse seemanne in, wat nie plek vir hande het nie. Jy moet terug gaan huis toe. Ek is terug by Miss Witherberry. Maar nie as 'n bediende nie, ek is nou 'n companion. So then, Lucas just says, oh, well, he says he can't keep his eyes off of her, so, it's a little bit strange, it's his sister. And he just tells her that you couldn't have been in the bush for more than 2 months. Like, where were you? I think I said that. Sorry if I repeated myself just now. And she just said, like, she worked in town, and she works at the place where she stole, like, a small little fruit. But she says, like, she doesn't work there anymore because, like, there were a lot of, like, sailors who came in, and they didn't have place for their hands, which obviously means, like, they were touchy-feely with her and stuff like that. So she's back with Miss Witherberry, but she's no longer, like, a maid. She's actually now a companion. Maar ek was op pad na jou toe met 'n boodskap. Wat 'n boodskap? Sy is so mooi. So she says the reason she's actually running towards Lucas is because she's here with a message for him. And he just asks what the message is, and then he says in his thoughts again, she's so beautiful. So something definitely has changed, like shifted in the way he looks at his sister. Daar het iemand uit die lange klif na jou gesoek. Hou hom stipdop om te sien hoe dit hom tref. Ek het hom by Eysterhout in die harde pad gekry. Wie? Hy sê sy naam is Lykie van Baas Petrus. So this is just important, like she tells him, and while she's saying this to him, she looks at him to see how this information hits him. Okay? And she mentions that there was someone from the Lange Kloof that was looking for Lucas. And the guy that was looking for is Lykie van Baas Petrus. So it's like one of the men who works there, like for one of the, I don't know, a boss, like Petrus. Wat wou hy hê? Wat wou hy hê, Nina? Nina met hoonlaggie oor die mond. Hy het gesoek na Benjamin Kamuti, wat eers in die Lange Kloof gewoon het. Hy het gesê hulle het hom gestuur om vir Benjamin Kamuti te kom sê van sy broer wat dood is, sy broer David. So now, she just asked what did he want, and she just said, or he just asked her what did they want, and she just said that they were looking for Benjamin Kamuti, the one who first lived in the Lange Kloof, and just to tell him, or they sent him to tell Benjamin that his brother is dead. So David, his brother, has passed away. David was dood. Echo al verder weg. Hy praat normaal. So first, like, it's just like the recorded voice that is just like repeating, David is dead, David is dead, dead. And then he just goes back to normal voice, and then it's really important, he says, ek gaan vir 'n paar dae Lange Kloof toe. And now he says, I'm going to go to the Lange Kloof for a few days. And this will obviously be the first time he's going to see his Kamuti family again after the 7 years. Nina is bekommerd oor hoe lank Lucas daar gaan bly, en sy vra hom baie vrae. Oh, sorry. So, yeah, it just says, like, Nina's very worried, and she doesn't think that he's just going to stay there for a few days. And, like, obviously, like, just going forward, he doesn't stay there for just a few days. He actually stays there for quite a while. And she asks him, like, a lot of questions about, like, the Lange Kloof. Like, what if you go and they don't recognize you? What if you go and this happens? So she's almost trying to scare him into not going back to the Lange Kloof. Miskien onthou die mense in die Lange Kloof jou nie eers meer nie. Dan sou hulle nie van David laat weet het nie. Miskien herken hulle jou nie eers meer nie. Of jy vir hulle nie. Ek sal hulle ken. Miskien woon hulle nie eers meer op dieselfde plek nie. dan soek ek hulle. Waar? Tot ek hulle kry. Hoekom? So now she's like, maybe they don't remember you. And he's like, but then they wouldn't have sent someone to tell me about David. Maybe they don't recognize you, you won't recognize them. And he's like, I will recognize them. And she's also like, maybe they don't live in the same place. And he's like, well, then I'll find them. And she just asks, but why? Hoekom vra jy, Nina? Hoekom vra jy al die dinge, Nina? So he just like asks her, like, why are you asking me all these questions? Sommer. Ek is bang, jy kom daaraan en jy wou nog altyd teruggegaan het, Lucas. As ek jou nie destyds uitgebring het, nadat ek jou die pad gewys het nie, sou jy eerder gegaan het. So this is really important because she just says, I'm just asking this because she's scared that he gets there and she's sort of like it's ... She thinks like when he gets there, he won't want to come back. And she just says like, I know you've always wanted to go back. And if she didn't like rat him out before when he was walking away, he would have gone back to the Lange Kloof. So remember, like, this was the point when Nina told him how to get to like the hard road, the deep valleys path to eventually get back to the Lange Kloof. And then remember when she got home, she actually told Elias. So yeah, she's the one that basically like ratted him out, so he couldn't get home because Elias then went to look for him and Elias caught him. Hoekom het jy my daai dag uitgebring? Ek weet nie. Miskien is dit waarom ek nou haastig is, dat jy moet wegkom vir pa jou kry. So he then just asked her, but why did you do this? And she's like, I'm not sure. And she's like, but maybe now, like, the reason I'm this, like, in such a hurry now to get you to go to the Lange Kloof so long is so the dad doesn't get you this time. So she does feel bad about what she did, but, I mean, she still did it, which was a horrible thing. Lucas sê hy sal 'n vis vang om saam met hom te vat. Nina sê hy moet gou maak, want Willem het Nina laat weet dat pa vir Lucas soek. Nina sê dat sy vir Willem gesê het, Lucas is saam met 'n skip weg. So Lucas just says he'll go and catch a fish to take with him to the Kamuti family. And Nina just says you need to hurry up because Willem told Nina that like the dad Elias is out and he's looking for Lucas. And Nina actually told Willem that Lucas is away with the ship. Vraag: hoekom het Nina vir pa gesê toe Lucas terug na die Lange Kloof probeer gaan het? Sorry, we already did this, but just it is very important to ask the question. I think we'll be able to answer it a little bit later on in the drama. Is why did Nina tell like the dad? Why did Nina not want Lucas to essentially go away then? Although she knew he was unhappy in the bush, like why did she like tell the dad where he was going? Ek sal na jou verlang. Ek dink nie jy kom weer terug nie, Lucas. Waarom sê jy so? Ek weet nie. Dis of jy klaar weg is. Waarom gaan jy terug Lange Kloof toe? So Lucas just tells Nina, I will miss you, and she's like, I don't think you're coming back. And he's like, why are you saying that? And she says it's almost like you're already gone. It's almost like you're already back in the Lange Kloof. And she just asks, why are you going back to the Lange Kloof? David was my broer voordat ek geweet het Willem en Christoffel is my broers. Hoe kon hy jou broer gewees het? Hy was brein. Hy was nog altyd my broer. So Lucas just says, David was my brother before Willem and Christoffel were my brothers. And he was like, but how could he have been your brother that he's brown? And he's like, he has always been my brother. Ons kan aanneem dat Lucas nog altyd aan sy Kamuti familie gedink het. En nou dat hy weer van hulle gehoor het, en weer dat hulle aan hom dink, sê Nina dis asof hy klaar weg is. Met ander woorde, sy gedagtes lê by hulle. So we can just assume that obviously Lucas has always thought about his Kamuti family, and now that he's heard of them again, and Nina says it's almost like it's gone again, it just means like his thoughts are with them. His thoughts are like 100% with the Kamuti family at this point. Okay, toneel 3, so the third scene. Black Wolvekrol by the Kamuti family. So now we're back in the Lange Kloof. We have the Wolvekrol, like the piece of ground that like Fila and her family lives on. Yeah. NB, Fila. Loopstelling loop, op band. Na David se dood wou hy nie weer op en die dokter het gesê sy bene sal heeltemal ingee. So this is just important. Remember, like always, like Stelling's like health has not been the best. But after David's death, like Stelling's health obviously took like a massive like downfall, and he basically didn't want to walk anymore. He couldn't really walk anymore. And before this, we also knew like he did have a problem with like his legs. And now the doctor actually said that if he doesn't walk around a lot, he'll eventually not be able to use his legs at all. So Fila's trying to convince him to walk like up and down around the house and stuff like that. Fila, daar kom iemand in die onderste pad aan. Hy het ver geloop, mens kan sien. Here, 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 dis 'n droom. Ek gaan val en ek gaan wakker word. Dis nie waar nie. Moenie dat ek 'n ding sien wat nie waar is nie. So at this point, Selling just tells Lika or Fila like there's someone coming down the road, and you can see that he's walked really far. And then eventually at the beginning, Fila was like, it's no one, it doesn't really matter. But then she realizes, oh my word, it's like Benjamin, and she's like, God, please don't tell me that like it's just like something that I'm seeing, that it's a dream. Tell me that it's actually true. Tell me that what I'm seeing is true. Selling en Lucas op. Maar toe staan hy daar, 3 van my af. Benjamin. 'n lange, mooie man in vuil flenterklere, maar met 'n fierheid in sy blou oë. En dis nie Benjamin my handskind nie. Dis 'n man, 'n wit man. En my hande wil na hom uitgaan, maar hulle bly langs my sye staan. Nooit het ek aan hom gedink as wit nie. Aan groot, maar nie as wit nie. En nou, Here, so she just says, but then like in front of her, Selling comes up with Lucas, and he's standing there, and she's like, he's like a very tall man, he's nice blue eyes, but she's like, his clothes aren't the best, like it's very like tattered and stuff like that. And she's like, she suddenly sees him as like a white man, and her hands wants to go out to him, but it doesn't. And the highlighted part just says like, when she was raising him, she never once thought of him as white. Always thought of him as like grown up, but not as white. So why is this happening now? And I think like obviously at this point we can also just speculate why this is happening. It could be because for 7 years of his life he has spent time with white people, and this might have sort of changed. Like it must have changed like sort of who he is being in the bush. And like I said, it's very obviously we know race is a big theme in the story. Is that although in the bush his life was worse than it would ever have been in the Lange Kloof. It was very important that like he was with white people because he was a white child. So it's that whole idea of race coming back in is like, did she see him as different now? Did she see him as white now because he spent so much time with white people? Did he actually change? And possibly yes, he did a little bit, not a lot though, because like in general, Lucas/Benjamin, he's a really good person. Okay, wat ons kan vra, hoekom dink Fila now on Benjamin as a wit man? So why does she think of him as a white man now? We sort of answered it, but I mean it's still up in the air. I think it's still open for interpretation. It might also be because she hasn't seen him in like 7 years, and the last time she saw him, he was not even a teenager, and now obviously like he's an adult. Lucas, groet ma my nie op band. Hy het my ma genoem. Loof die Here o my siel. Here, hou my bene styf sodat ek hierdie hemel regop beleef vandag. Moenie so huil nie, ma. Ek het gekom in die sak is 'n vis. As ek reg onthou het iemand destyds gesê ek moet 'n vis saam terugbring. Moenie huil nie. Kyk, ek het die 5 shillings ook nog. Lag en soen haar op die bond. So at this point he just says like, Mom, aren't you greeting me? And she on her recorded voice she's like, he called me mother. Like he called me mom. And he's like praise the Lord, like she's very happy about this. And he just says, don't cry so much. I brought fish because the last time I saw you, you said that I should bring fish when I come back. And I also have the 5 shillings. So this also once again is an indicator that he has not stopped thinking about the Kumuti family. Lig de doof uit met Fila's stem op band. So now the lights dim out with Fila's recorded voice. Ons moes Selling lawe en hom in die kooi sit. Hy het gesê Kitty moet die Bybel bring en vir hom van die verlore seun lees. Maar Kitty het te veel gehuil en toe het Benjamin Marshall gelees. Ons het nie vetgemaakte kalf geslag en geëet nie. Ons het almal om Selling bly sit en 7 jaar tussen ons losgepraat. So at this point like Selling was like so happy and so excited that he was very tired by the end of the day. So they had to help like put him in the bed and stuff like that. And he asked Kitty to come and read like a piece in the Bible about like the lost son. But Kitty's crying so much, like then Benjamin had to read it. And they didn't even really like eat the food like that evening. They basically just spoke to each other, and they all sat around Selling's bed and they spoke to each other, and they spoke about the 7 years that they've obviously missed with each other. Sorry, it should be this one first. Sorry. Fila, hy is klaar met die bos. Selling, hy sal nie weer teruggaan nie. So Fila just says he's done with the bush. Like he said, Selling, he told, like she's talking to Selling, and she's like, he said he wouldn't go back. But then Selling says something that's important. Daar's 'n hartseer in hom, Fila. He says there's like a sadness in Benjamin, and you can see it. Ek weet, maar dit sal regkom, op band. Maar kleintyd se wil was ook nog in hom. Daarby het Selling op die dambal loop sit en hom van daar af in sy kwaad gehelp. Selling help Benjamin om te leer hoe om te roei. Dink terug aan die skuite wat hy gemaak het toe hy jonger was. So it just says here that, Phila sort of like, yeah, it will eventually be better. And she just says the record voice, like, what he wanted to do, like his strong will, it's still there from young time. And she says, yeah, as well, he gravitated towards the water and mentions that Selling is helping him. Selling is helping him to learn how to row and stuff like that. And like I said, just refer you back to when he was younger and how he always liked being close to the water. So NB 104 tot 105. Benjamin is besig om te werk. Hy is besig om iets te kap en Phila sê dat Benjamin soos 'n man wat honger is werk en nie genoeg kan kry nie. So at this point it's also like Benjamin's busy working on something and he's actually making his own small like boat. And Phila just says like he's working like a man that is like hungry and he works like someone that can't get enough. Okay, so it's just like, yeah, it just says the scene shifts from outside to inside the house. Julie het gekom en gegaan, Augustus, September. Die volstruiskuikens was geil en verspiedig. Kitty het die eerste aandblommetjies huis toe gebring en die soet reuke deur die huis getrek. So she just actually talks to her record voice about the shift in times. When he got there, it was like Julie, it was July, it was the winter. And now they're going into September, which is spring. So you remember he told Nina, I'm only going to be there for a few days, but now he's already been there for 3 months. Hy was 'n man toe hy hier aangekom het, Phila, maar nou is hy nog meer van 'n man. Ja, Selling, dis omdat hy reg eet en nie meer van patats afleef nie. Wag Benjamin, ek kom. So at this point, like, Selling just says like he was a man when he got here, but now he's more of a man. And Phila says yes, it's because he's actually eating right. He's not just eating like sweet potatoes anymore, because that's all they had in the bush. Where here with the Kumuti family, he actually has a somewhat completed diet. He's getting meat in and everything like that. So ja. Soos die tyd verbygegaan het ek agtergekom dat daar dinge was waar Benjamin bly wegskram het, soos die van Rooyens. Oor die ander mense by die plek waar hy gewoon het hy maklik gepraat. Toe dit die dag gebeur, het ek skielik gewens, daar was nog uitstel. So she's just saying here that like as time went on, she realized that he doesn't want to talk about certain things. So he always stayed away from talking about the Van Rooyens. So he spoke about the other people in the bush, but he didn't talk about the Van Rooyens. And now I'm just saying here, hoekom wou Benjamin in die begin nie oor die Van Rooyens praat nie? Is dit oor die trauma of omdat hy gevoelens vir Nina, sy sussie, ontwikkel het? So now I think it's just important to ask ourselves this question. Why did he not want to talk about the Van Rooyens in the beginning? Is it because of the trauma? Because obviously he was abused there. The time in the bush was not a good time for Benjamin. Or is it because he started developing feelings for his sister? Is that why he has not been talking about the Van Rooyen family? But then Phila actually says there at the end of her little speaking turn that when the day came when he spoke about the Van Rooyens, she actually wished that she had more time. It didn't happen so soon. Ma was die een wat destyds gesê het, 'n kind van 3 sou dit nie van agter uit die bos tot hier gemaak het nie. Glo maar dit nog. Waarheen wou hy praat? Hulle het dan gesê hy het die mense onmiddellik as sy eie aangeneem. Ek glo dit nog. Maar hoekom vra jy my dan nou na dooie dinge uit? Wat kan ons daaraan verander? So he just asks, like, one time he just asks her, do you still believe the thing that you said when I was younger, that you don't think that a child of 3 would have made it through the bush, over the hill to the Langekloof? And on a recorded voice, she's like, why is he talking about this now? And then she says something sort of important as well, like, the people who saw Phila actually told Phila that Benjamin took these people as his own. Like, he didn't really think about the community family. He was happy with the Van Rooyens. And we know that is not true. Like, we know that it's not true. He hated it with the Van Rooyens. But Phila then just turns to normal speech again. And she says, like, I still believe that. But why are you asking this? Like, what can we change about what happened? Ek dink nie dis 'n dooi ding nie, ma. Dit pla my die laaste tyd al hoe meer en dit voel vir my of ek nie weet wie ek werklik is nie. Ek het gehoop dat dit hier in my tot ruste sal kom, maar dit gebeur nie. Daar is daar wat dit beter is as ander, maar dis min. En dan is daar weer daar dat my verstand vir my sê, ek is daardie kind en dat die duiwel in my ingevaar het. So this is also important. He just says it's not a dead thing. It's important, especially like it's been bothering him the last little while because he doesn't know who he is. And he hoped that when he came to Langekloof, that whole idea would die down. But he's like, some days it is better, but other days, his thoughts were telling him that he is that child and then the like devil was in him. But obviously this referring to the fact that he has developed feelings for his sister. And that essentially is not a very normal thing. No, that's not a very normal thing. It's not a normal thing to develop feelings for your sister. It shouldn't happen. Um, so he's just like that's sort of why he's struggling with this about is he a committee, is he a van Rooyen, because of his feelings for Nina. Okay, so before we know, he always struggled with his identity, and he always probably will. But now it's just like that added extra element to it that he's fallen in love with his sister. Weet maar wie ek is. Jy is 'n weggooi lam wat God aan Vila Komitie toebetrou het, en so moes jou hart dit gevat het. Maar toe kom neek hulle alles met ander stories te mekaar. Ek wou nie gehad het ma met ma so ontstel nie. Moenie wegdraai nie, laat ons hierdie dinge losstoring en reg aan mekaar sit vandag. Want ek gaan vandag vir jou, vir God, net een vraag vra. Voel jy soos Benjamin Komitie of soos Lucas van Rooyen? Wie is jy in jou siel? Answered by Benjamin. So at this point, like, he just asked it, and he's hiding his pain. Do you know who I am? He asks to Phila, and Phila says, you know, his mom gave him her away. Like, actually, like, she left her in front of Phila's house. So, you know, and then she raised him as, like, her child because God gave her the opportunity to do that. But then when these census guys came, it messed everything up. And this is possibly what obviously caused the identity issue within Benjamin / Lucas. We don't know if this might have happened as he got older, but obviously being told that you are Benjamin and then being told that you are Lucas, it must obviously, like, it was a very big toll it took on him, like going to another family, going and living with white people. Yeah, so he really struggles with his identity, and I think what happened to him just made it a little bit worse. And he just says, like, you know, the mom gets really upset and he's like, I didn't want to do that to you. But Phila says, don't turn away. Let's finish talking about this. And she asks him, I'm asking you one question. In your heart, do you feel, or in your soul, do you feel like Benjamin Komitie or do you feel like Lucas van Rooyen? Die dag toe ek teruggekom het, toe ek daar onder in die pad staan, het ek geweet ek is weer by die huis. Laat dit dan so wees. Vila Komitie het jou opgetel, jy is haar seun. Vergeet van die van Rooyens, jy is by die huis. So Benjamin then says, like, the day when he came back, the day when he was standing there at the bottom of the road, he knew he was back home. And this should tell us that in his heart, yes, like, he does feel 100% that he is a Komitie, and he likes being with the Komitie family. But obviously there's still that question in his mind about who am I actually. Dis nie al nie maar. Ek is nie dom nie, Benjamin. Ek weet jou vel is wit en ons nie. Ek weet jy kan in die lange kloof vir die res van jou lewe in my huis woon nie. Ek het voorsorg gemaak, vooruit gekyk. So Benjamin just says that's not all. And Phila's like, I know that you are white and we aren't. And I know that you can't live in the Lange Kloof in my house for the rest of your life. But she says, like, I made provisions for this. Die laaghaanse hiergrond is op die dorp by Mr. Kenkrons beskryf op my naam. Ek wou dit destyds op jou naam gesit het, maar toe laat ek my van ander keer, omdat hulle gesê het, jy sal nie terugkom kloof toe om te bly nie. Ek het my ore uitgeleen, omdat my geloof te swak was. Maar môre gaan ons dorp toe, en die laaghaanse grond kom op jou naam, soos dit van die begin af moes gewees het. Ek kan die grond vat nie, maar dis Tolly, Emma en Kitty se grond. So at this point she just says the provision she made is that, like, die laaghaanse grond, it's like property that you can rent, so it's like a little piece of property you can rent. It's in Phila's name, and a while ago, like, she wanted to put it in Lucas's name, but a lot of people told her Lucas probably won't come back, or if he does come back, he won't stay here. But she's like, tomorrow we're going to go into town, we're going to go to Mr. Cairncross, and we're going to put this property in your name. And he just says, like, I can't take the ground. It is Tolly, Emma and Kitty, so I was referring to his other brother and his two sisters. Van wanneer af besluit jy of verander oor Vila Komitie se goed? Toe ek jou gevat het, het ek jou soos my eie gevat. Daar lê David dood. Onder op die avontuur lê Tolly dronk. Emma en Kitty is meisiekinders, vir hulle sit ek in 'n trommel op sy. As Tolly die drank los, is die eerste stuk van die wolwekraal syne, maar die laaghaans se grond is joune. Jy sal eendag hier in die kloof staan as Vila Komitie se optelkind, en ek sal sorg dat jy jou nie daaroor hoef te skaam nie. Die grond wat ek jou gee, is net 'n begin. Wil solank die vere hou, en koop nog grond aan, sodat jy sterk staan. as hulle die dag agter jou rug sê 'n bruin vrou het hom grootgebring. So she just says like, since when does anyone tell me what to do, like, with my property? And she just said like, because he's sort of referring to like it should be their property because they are her biological kids, and she's like, no, when I took you in, I took you in as my own, and this means I'm going to make provision for you the same way I'm going to make for my biological children. And she just mentions that, like, Thorley, the brother, he's always drinking, and Emma and Kitty are girls, so they'll get like another thing from her. And she actually mentions that when Thorley stops drinking, part of the Volverkral will be his. But from the beginning, the Lachonsgrond has always been like Benjamin. So the whole idea was always to give it to Benjamin. And she's just like, she just wants to make sure that he's provided for, that one day when he's older and someone mentions, like a brown woman raised him, he doesn't need to be like ashamed of it. Because obviously girls, sorry, I'm saying girls all the time because I teach girls, but at this point it's just that the reason she's saying like being ashamed of it, I don't actually think Benjamin is ashamed of it, but people, because of race relations, will sort of use that as a bad thing against him, although it isn't. But I think we understand as well, like, race is very, like, people say silly things, and people honestly believe that, like I said, it's better to be with like a white child, to be with the white family than with the colored family, although the colored family really provided for him a lot better. Benjamin sê dit sou maklik wees om die grond te vat as hy kon sê dat hy dit eendag by haar sal koop. Hy sê ook dat daar iets is wat Phila nie weet nie. So he also just, like, he doesn't really say anything much more about that, but he just says that it would have been easier if he knew that one day he would be able to pay Phila back for the ground. But then he's like, but there's something else I haven't told you. Ek het verlief geraak op my suster, Nina. 'n Koue gaan deur haar, jou suster. Ja, ma. So now he's like, the big bombshell, bam, I have fallen in love with my sister Nina. And Phila says there's like, it's almost like a cold going through her, and she's like, your sister. Hoe het dit dan gebeur, Benjamin? Dit het net gebeur, ma. Ek het dit nie gesoek nie. En sy, wat van haar? Sy weet dit nie, ma. Ek is net vir haar 'n broer. As sy jou suster was, Benjamin, sy bloed gekeer het. Die feit dat jy op haar verlief geraak het, is net nog bewys dat ek reg gehad en hulle verkeerd. Maar my reg kan jou nie vandag van Lucas van Rooyen verlos nie. Daar is net een mens wat dit kan doen, en dis waarin jy moet omdraai. Wie? Bartha van Rooyen. So she just asked, how did this happen? He's like, it just happened. And Phila's like, well, this just gives me more reason to believe that I was right, because blood would sort of like not go for blood, so sister and brother wouldn't fall in love. Blood wouldn't allow that to happen. This is what she says. And she's like, but although she then believes that she was right all the time and the other people were wrong, she does say, but I'm not the person that can like relieve you of Lucas van der Rooyen. I can't relieve you of this identity. The only person who is able to do that is Bartha van der Rooyen, and you need to go to her. Miskien as Benjamin uitvind dat hy nie van Rooyen is nie, kan dit hom help om uit te vind wie hy werklik is, tema identiteit. So at this one also mentions that maybe if Benjamin can also find out that, like, he knows he's not biologically like Phila and Stelling's child, but if he can at least find out that he's not a van Rooyen, it might help him find out who he actually is, which links back to the theme of identity. Okay, Danielle Fish at the 4th scene. Black boss says now he's back in the bush. He's going to see the van Rooyen family because he wants to find out. Is dit jy, Christoffel? Dis nie Christoffel nie, dis ek. Lucas? Ek dog dis Christoffel, het hy jou gekry? Hoe meen ma, het hy my gekry? Hy is weg dorp toe om kos te koop en sommer te kyk of hy jou nie kry nie. Of jy al terug is. Nina het gesê jy is met 'n skip saam weg. So now it's just Bartha's there, and when she hears the door open, she thinks it's Christoffel, but it's not Christoffel, it's Lucas, and he just asked, why did you think it's Christoffel? Or did Christoffel, she also asked, did Christoffel find you? And he's like, why would you say that? And she just says that Christoffel has gone into town to go and buy food, but he's also going to look for Lucas, see if he's back since he left with the ship. Or that's what Nina said. Lucas wonder of Nina van Elias weet, en Bartha sê sy doen. Sy was bang dat Lucas terug sal kom en nie weet wat aangaan nie. So something happened to Elias, and he just wonders, the first thing he thinks of is Nina, and he wonders if Nina knows. And the mom says, yeah, Nina does know. And Nina was quite like worried that Lucas will get you, and Lucas doesn't know what's actually happening, what's going on. So this also indicates to us that Nina does think of Lucas. Elias roep vanuit die kamer. Hy klink anders. So just like this is what happened to Elias. So he calls from the room, but he sounds very different. Die groot voete het hom getrap. Anderkant die Guna rivier het die koei hom geskraap en gegooi, dat hy nou al maande lê. Uit daardie liggaam moes hy 2 dae lank kruip en hom sleep om by die huis te kom. Ons het nie gedink ons sou hom deurhaal nie. Van kop tot tone was hy pimpelblou. So he tried to kill one of the elephants, because remember, he's always been after like the tusks. He's always been after the ivory. And so the elephants trampled him, and he was quite badly injured. They didn't think he was going to make it, but he did. But at this point, like, he can't really do much. He's still in quite a lot of pain. Yeah. Daar's vleis in die sak. Vleis. Ja, skaapvleis. Sit die sak op die tafel neer. Wanneer verwag maak Christoffel terug? Uit kamer gesmoorde roep. So he just says like in a bag there's meat, and Martha's like meat, because this obviously goes back. They do not get any meat to eat. Okay, they mainly eat like sweet potatoes. That's all they can afford. So obviously, just once again indicates to us that the Kumuti family has always been able to take better care of Lucas/Benjamin than the Van Rooyen family ever was able to. Ja. Hy moes al hier gewees het. Ek staat bekommerd oor hom. Wanneer is hy weg? Dis 4 dae. Ek sien jy het nuwe klere aan, skoene ook. Was jy ver weg met die skip saam? Het hulle jou goed gebetaal? Ek was nie met 'n skip weg nie, ma. Ek was Langekloof toe. Sien hoe die skrik in haar hande kom. So now she just like talking back and forth. Where's Christoffel? He's been away a few days. And then the mom's just like, you have new clothes on. You look like so well taken care of. I hope they paid you a lot. And then Lucas is like, I wasn't away with the ship. I went to the Langekloof. And when he mentions this, you can actually see, like, they say here, like, the fright in her hands, which obviously means she's starting to shake. Okay, so we also need to ask, why is her reaction like this when we talk about the Langekloof? Langekloof, wag ek. Daar is iets wat ek van ma wil weet. Nee ma, jy gaan nie wegkom nie. Ek dink ek het jou pa hoor roep, Lucas. Los my arm, Lucas. Wat is dit met jou? Pa kan wag. Ek het lank tot hier toe gewag. En ma gaan my in die oë kyk en ma gaan vir my sê of ek jou kind is of nie. Haar oë word wild van die skrik. Antwoord my ma, is ek julle kind wat weggeraak het? Is ek Lucas? So as soon as he mentions the Langekloof and he's like, I want to ask you something, she tries to get away. She tries to say like, oh, your dad called me, I need to go to your dad. And he's like, no, the dad can wait. And he's like, look me in the eyes and tell me, am I your child or not? And he actually just says like, her eyes are wild from like being frightened. And he's like, just answer me. Like, am I your child? Am I Lucas? Wat vra jy my dan nou? Hoe kan jy so met my staat praat? Ma moet vandag vir my die waarheid sê. Al is dit hoe swaar. Is ek Lucas of nie? Bartha skree amper. Wie anders? Wie anders? Jy's Lucas. Ek het dit voor die magistraat gesweer en ek sweer dit weer. Jy's Lucas. So she's like going a little bit like, she's getting anxious, and he's like, Mom, just tell me the truth today. Am I Lucas or not? And she's like, who else would you be? Yes, you are Lucas. I promise this in front of the magistrate. You are Lucas. Hoekom was Bartha so angstig toe Lucas van die Langekloof begin praat het? So that's just that thing I mentioned. Why was she so anxious and so panicked when he mentioned the Langekloof? Okay, toneel 5, so the 5th scene. Black strand, so we back like at the ocean. Lucas en Nina loop saam, maar Nina sê Lucas is nie meer dieselfde teenoor haar nie. So now we sort of back. So obviously now Lucas got this information. He is a Van Rooyen, and this means like obviously his feelings towards Nina, it's not the right thing. Like, you should not be attracted to your sister. You should not have fallen in love with your sibling. And so the two of them are walking together, but Nina actually tells Lucas, you aren't the same towards me. And this obviously goes back to his feelings for her and the fact that he's not allowed to have those feelings. Nina, ek wil nie hê jy moet my verkeerd verstaan nie. Ek wil ook nie hê jy moet van my wegbly nie, maar dit sou miskien beter wees as jy nie so baie kom nie. Nou goed, Lucas van Rooyen, van hierdie oomblik af loop ek nie weer agter jou aan nie. Wat my betref, kan jy vergaan in daardie loodsboot, want dis al waar jy omgee. Jy's verkeerd, Nina. Toe ons klein was, het ek altyd gedink jy is slimmer en beter as Willem en Christoffel. Maar nou weet ek, jy is net so onnosel en 'n lafaard daarby. Nina, moenie met my praat nie, hardloop weg. So now, like, he just tells Nina that, I do want to spend time with you, but maybe just for this time being, you shouldn't come to me as much. And she gets quite upset and she's like, fine, then I just won't come to you. I won't run after you. You can just stay in like your little navigation boat because that's obviously all you care about. And he's like, you are wrong. And she's like, when we were small, I thought you were different from Christoffel and Willem, but now I know you were the same. And he still wants to say something to her, but then she runs away. Lucas op band terwyl die toneel na die boshuis verskuif. This is important. Now we hear his recorded voice. And in the point of hearing his recorded voice, we shift the scene from the ocean to the bush. And they're back in the bush house. Nee, ek is nie Lucas van Rooyen nie. Weet iemand wie ek is? Weet Phila Kumuti die waarheid, maar sê dit nie. Nee, weet Elias van Rooyen. So he's like, no, I can't be Lucas van Rooyen. His feelings for Nina are quite strong. And he's like, does anyone know who I actually am? Does Phila Kumuti know? Or maybe, does Elias van Rooyen know? En B, hy wil nie tyd saam met Nina spandeer nie, omdat hy weet hoe hy voel nie reg is nie. Boetie en sissie. Maar sy gevoelens vir Nina is so sterk, dat hy weet hy is nie Lucas van Rooyen nie. So I just mentioned this before, but it's important to realize he doesn't want to spend time with her because he knows his feelings are wrong because they were brother and sister. But his feelings for Nina are so strong. He's like, I know I'm not Lucas van Rooyen. Okay, toneel 6, now we're the 6th scene. And this is a very, 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 very important scene. Black boshuis, of boshuis, Christoffel, Bart en Elias is besig om te eet. So now remember we had that shift towards the bush in the bush house, and inside Christoffel, Bart en Elias are busy eating. Naam Christoffel, naam pa, die een kant van Elias se gesig en nek lyk soos ou verdorde leer. Hy eet nie meer met sy regterhand nie. Die lepel is in sy linkerhand. Wragtig. Ek sien 'n hond loop weg, maar 'n hond loop weer terug ook. Naand ma, sluk swaar. Naand Lucas. So now he gets there and he greets like Christoffel and the dad, and he just mentions that Elias, the one half of his face looks like old leather, so obviously like, and he also is not eating or doing anything with his right hand, so just saying like he does look really bad from like after the elephants trampled him, but I mean granted, he tried to kill the elephant, so. And he just like, Elias is pure trash. And Elias is like, oh, I see a dog walks away, but a dog always walks back. Referring to your child as a dog. No, man. This guy says, like, I feel like every time Elias opens his mouth, we realize that he's really just a bad person. And then he greets his mom. And he says, like, she swallows heavily. So obviously she's nervous again to see Lucas when she greets him back. And so she's like, Lucas just asked, like, Elias, how's it going? How's it going with your health and stuff like that? Elendig. Julle weet nie waar ek deur is nie, en nog minder waar ek in is. Ek sê dit die hele dag vir jou ma, maar jou ma is ook nie meer wat sy was nie. Hierdie regterarm van my wil glad nie oplig nie, ek sweer hy is af. En my been is nog lank nie aangegroei nie. As hy nog af was, sou pa glad nie kon trap nie. So nou, Elias. So he goes in, he's like, oh my word, you have no idea what I've been through. This is so horrible. I'm telling your mom, but your mom isn't the same as she's always been. I can't really lift my right arm, and my leg is still like very sore. He doesn't know if he's going to be able to use his leg again. And Lucas is like, asked him, can you step on it? And he's like, yes. And then Lucas is like, well, that means your leg. There's nothing actually, like, it's not that there's nothing wrong with your leg, but your leg isn't like, you won't be able to never use it again. Because if that was the case, you wouldn't have been able to step on it at all. Elias verontwaardig. Ek mog op hom trap, maar ek sê vir jou, hy is nog lank nie tot op sy plek gegroei nie. Op 'n steier sal ek nooit weer kom nie. My lot is om te sit en ek moet dit net vat. Wat kan ek anders doen? As jy nou weer huis toe kom, is al 3 my seuns in die span en kan ons kusyne ook lewer. Dan koop ons 'n swaar geweer en julle leer almal skiet. En dan sal ons 'n ding sien. So now he just says, but he's quite shocked that his son would say this. And he's like, but I won't be able to use it ever again. He's like, I'll just have to sit. That's like my fate. But like, let's be honest, Elias hasn't been doing anything before this. Before, when the kids were doing like the hard labor, he was sitting and watching them. He is a very lazy person. But now immediately he shifts back to like, he really doesn't care about anyone else. Like, he has no empathy. And he's like, well, now that all 3 of my sons are back again, we can go and buy some guns and we can teach each other how to shoot, and then we can do a thing or see a thing here in the bush. Okay, so immediately he's back to how he can make money off of his children. So the whole time when he's doing this, like, Barta is like calling his name. Like I said, Elias literally only cares about himself. He doesn't care about anyone else. Wat is dit, Barta? Ek sê vir julle, 'n Waarmakery sal in hierdie bos 'n betalende ding wees. Ek het die ding lankal oordink. Ek lê nie verniet s'nags wakker in my ellende nie. So this is really important because he's like, what's wrong with Partha? And he just says, like, doing this, like, having a gun and killing like some of the animals and stuff like that, you will make a lot of money. And then he actually says the highlighted part. And this is so important because this is actually what Elias does all the time. He says, like, I've overthought about this, overthought about this, in the evenings when I lie awake. So he's actually saying, like, his overthinking takes obviously over everything. He thinks so much about how he can achieve wealth that he does absolutely nothing. So Elias is the main reason he is in the situation he is in. He can't blame it on anyone else. Like, he had opportunities to improve his life and he chose not to. He chose to overthink everything about how else he can get rich by using other people's labor. Pa, ek is 'n man wat 'n plan kan sien vir 'n ander man om nog in die kop gekry het. Pa, daar's iets verkeerd met ma. Sy is bly die laaste tyd bekwaald. Okay, so, Lucas is like, Dad. And tells Elias, your dad. And Elias is like, I'm a man that sees a plan before any other man sees him. So there's like the mom's having like a low-key panic attack. And this dad still only talks about himself. And Lucas just says, Dad, there's something wrong with mom. And he actually says, the last little while, there has been something wrong with her. Partha is bekwaald vanaf die laaste keer wat Lucas haar besoek het en gevra het of hy regtig 'n kind is. So she has been acting this strange and she's been being this anxious and this scared since the last time that Lucas visited, and Lucas asked her, am I really your child? And this is super, super important. Partha, die woorde skeer uit haar uit. Ek het die verkeerde kind gevat, Elias. Ek het iemand anders se kind gevat. So, yeah, like, it's like the words like tear out of her. It's very difficult for her to say this. And she's like, I took the wrong child. So she's admitting, that she took someone else's child. Lucas or Benjamin is not theirs. It's not their Lucas that went missing a long time ago. Dit was nie Lucas nie. Vrou, wat praat jy? Ek het iemand anders se kind gevat die dag. Ek het dit agtergekom toe dit te laat was. Toe hy al hier was. Toe het ek weer gedink dis my verbeelding. En dit was weggestoot. Maar dit wou nooit lank wegbly nie. En die laaste tyd nooit meer nie. Toe hy laas by die huis was, het hy my gevra. En ek het gesê ek het voor die magistraat gesweer. Maar ek het vals gesweer. Hy is nie Lucas nie. So she just says like it's not Lucas. And she says when they took him home, she realized this immediately. And then she thought maybe it was imagination. And then she was like, no, this is not our child. And since the last time he's visited her and asked her this question, she's like, she knew, like, it was in her the whole time. This is not her child. And she literally just said, like, I didn't, like, under oath, I lied. This is not our child. And I think what's the really important thing is please don't give Partha, because I don't know if any of you have watched the older movie, but they give, like, try to, like, sort of indicate that Partha, you don't give her, like, redeeming factors, like she wasn't that bad. She ruined this child's life, and she knew from the beginning this wasn't her child, yet she still let him live in the bush with her abusive husband. Like, she did a really bad thing. She is one of the main reasons that Lucas isn't, I mean, we're going to read now about someone else who's the main reason, but essentially she is one of the main reasons that Lucas has experienced trauma in his life. The reason Lucas had to go and live in the bush and not live with his Kumuti family. God, vrou, jy eil. Ek eil nie, Elias. Ek sal magistraat toe gaan en dit loop sweer. Ek kan dit nie langer in my dra nie. Dit het te swaar geraak vir my. Ons Lucas se gebeendere is langs die om 10 opgetel. Hy het geverdwaal en geverhonger en die engels het hom gevat. So Elias is like, oh my gosh, women, like, you're going crazy, like, there's something wrong with you. And she's like, no, I will even go back to the magistrate and I will tell them that I made a mistake, because it's become too heavy for me. Now, granted, this as well, it's become too heavy for her, and this is why she's saying something. But I mean, obviously, Lucas has been struggling with this, like / Benjamin, he's been struggling with this the whole time that he was here with them for 7 years. And she just says, like, she has, like, already accepted that their child died, their Lucas died. They found his bones close to the river. The angels came to take him. Like, so she knew, like, her child was dead. Vrou, jy eil. Jy het hom onmiddellik uitgeken vir die magistraat. And now, this is so important. So he just once again said, but you immediately identified in front of the magistrate. And if you watched my first video on this, you would know that I mentioned how important it is for later in the book to realize she immediately went, like, the magistrate told her, take your time. And she immediately went to Lucas and she said, this is my child. Why? How did it happen so quickly if you haven't seen your child in such a long time? Okay. Ek het nie. Die man wat ek trommel gaan haal het, die lange met die bril, het agter my in die gang kom staan, net voordat ek moes ingaan. En toe het hy in my nek gesê, die een met die blou hempie aan. So this is important. She didn't actually identify me immediately. And this is so important. So the tall man with the glasses, so the tall man in the beginning, one of the census guys, the people who started all of this, he whispered in her ear that she needs to choose the child with the blue shirt on. Yeah, that's horrible. Ek was so bang en de mekaar, ek kon nie dink nie. Toe het hulle die deur oopgemaak en my in die kamer ingestoot en toe staan die ryk kinders daar en die een in die middel het 'n blou hempie aan. So she says she was so confused, she didn't know what's going on, so when she went in and she saw the one with the blue shirt, she immediately just pointed to him. Lucas op band, die een met die blou hempie aan, een man se wil, een man se mag. Ek kan hom met my kaal hande vermoor, die een met die blou hempie aan. Een simpele sin wat Phila Kumuti soos 'n mal ding oor die berg laat loop het, en selling die pad hoe lank laat dophou het. Ek is niemand. So Lucas, then it's just his recorded voice because Lucas is leaving now. He's not a Van der Rooyen, so why should he still spend time there? And he's like the one with the blue shirt on. One man's will, one man's power. And it's important to also realize it's one man's abuse of power. And I mean, it's horrible. And he just said like he can kill this man with his bare hands because obviously Phila sort of went crazy. She walks over like into town so many times for so many days, and Selling always looked at the road hoping that Lucas would come back or Benjamin would come back. So like he affected so many people, and then he just says, "I am no one." So it just like shows that although he's sort of like, okay, maybe I'm Van der Rooyen, I'm a Kumuti, in his heart he's a Kumuti. Now that he knows he's not a Van der Rooyen, he's like, I am no one. Like, I don't know who I am. I don't know who my birth mother is. I don't know who I am. Okay, NB. Think aan die misbruik van mag. So think about the abuse of power that happened here. Okay, and remember, like, this abuse of power, or this power relations, is one of the like themes in the book. So die lange wou net nie gehad het 'n wit seun moet tussen braai mense wees nie. Hierdie man het Benjamin/Lucas se hele lewe amper verwoes oor mag. Dink aan Benjamin/Lucas se identiteit. Hoe het hierdie een geval sy identiteit beïnvloed? So it's just saying like the tall guy literally just didn't want to be wrong, and he didn't want Phila to be right, and he didn't want a white child to live with a brown family. So much so that he ruined Benjamin/Lucas' whole life. Okay, and just because of power, just because like wanting to have the power and not wanting a person of color to be right. I mean, that is absolutely horrible. Like, it upsets me so much. Every time I read this part in the drama, I get so upset. And then it's just also like thinking about his identity. Lucas / Benjamin's identity. How did this one person's abuse of power influence his identity and how he sees himself? So yeah, that's all, guys. So I would actually say, like, obviously, like, our main antagonist is Elias because of how he abuses the kids, but another antagonist would be this tall man who, with his abuse of power, ruins someone's life. So die derde bedryf, toneel 7. Plek Wolwekraal. So now the place is at the Wolwekraal, so where Phila and her family lives. And Benjamin is not with them. It's just like the rest of the community families there. So basically, it is Phila, Selling, and Kitty that is there. Phila, moenie die bladse punte onder jou arm laat omkrul nie. Die brief moet netjies by hom aankom. Hy moenie hom skaam nie. So they're actually busy writing a letter for him, and Kitty's the one that's writing. And Phila just says the letter needs to look really well, it needs to look very nice, because he shouldn't be ashamed. So she always goes back to this whole idea that in this town, people would assume like that you should be ashamed if you were raised by people of color. Okay, and Phila just wants to make sure that he never feels like that. Still, skryf vir hom ma sê dit lê donker in ma se gemoed oor hom. Ons het nie van hom gehoor nie. As dit goed gaan en hy is gesond, is alles reg. Maar as dinge vir hom verkeerd loop staan bodder het, moet hy skrywig meer as bid ons vir hom kan doen. Sê vir hom ma sê, stadig ma. So now Phila just says like what they should be saying, and Phila just said like she's very sad because they don't know if he's okay, And all she just wants to say is that if it's going well with him, everything's okay. But if he needs anything more than prayers, he needs to let them know what they can do for him. So once again, this family is so supportive. This family is so helpful. Contrast that to like the horrible 7 years he had with the Van der Wyn family. Skryf hom ma sê, om te gaan lê is een ding en om weer op te staan 'n ander. Op te kom 'n ander. Af is makliker as op. Maar as jy eers weer op is, kry jy krag om op te bly. So she just said like, tell him, write down that mom says that to go and lie is one thing, but to get back up is another. And she just says down is easier than up, but as soon as you're starting to go up again, you get the power to stay at the top. You get like the determination to stay at the top. So she's still trying to encourage him. Obviously, he's been going through a lot of things, struggling with his identity, having such traumatic things happen to him. But Phila's always encouraging. She's always telling him to keep his head up high. And it's just a point, sorry, where Kitty actually asked Phila, should we write to him about Tolly? And Phila says no. So Tolly is in die tronk. Hy was dronk en het iemand gesteek. So Tolly is in jail because he was drunk and he stabbed someone. Selling vertel vir Benjamin van die volstryse wat hulle verkoop het. And then Selling has an opportunity to say something, or like let Kitty write something down, and he talks about the ostriches that they actually sold. But also before this, they're starting to build on the ground they bought for Benjamin, the Laghanse grond. So it's actually going really, really well for the Kamuti family. En NB eindig die brief, stuur groete vir Nina. So the way the letters ended is saying, send our greetings to Nina. Okay, so die derde bedryf toneel 8, Black Sea, so Benjamin's back by the sea now. Hy laat weet Mr. Ben dat hy terug is, en Ben sê hy klink beter en noem hom Van Rooyen. So he just tells Mr. Ben, John Ben, that he is back, and John Ben says he sounds a lot better, and he calls him Van Rooyen. Ek is, en ek sal van hier af bekend staan as Benjamin Kamuti. Dis nie 'n nuwe naam nie, dis my ou naam. Daarby sal ek net kan uithelp tot Khalil weer reg is om sy span te vat. Dan gaan ek terug Langekloof toe, na my mense toe. So he says he is doing much better, and he says, from now on, I will be known as Benjamin Kamuti. It's not a new name, it's always been my name. And he says he will help until Khalil is okay again to work, because then he's going back to the Langekloof, back to his people. So it might also show us that he is getting part of his identity back now that he officially knows he's not a Van Rooyen, and he calls the Kamuti family his people, because those are the people that are his family. Those are the ones he sees as his family. Jy is beter, jy bly nog 'n raaisel, maar jy is die man wat ek in jou gesoek het. Kamuti het jy gesê, ja. Dis 'n eerbare naam, 'n ou Hottentot naam, dis reg. Loop sê vir Joop Stoep jy's terug. Joop Stoep sal vandag ook nog vir my moet instaan, Mr. Ben. Ek moet na Miss Witherbury se huis toe gaan. So John Ben just says like, it's a very honorable name that you have the surname, and he's like, yes, it is. So just like Benjamin is very proud of being a Kamuti. He's not ashamed of it. He thinks it's an amazing thing, and he loves it. And he just tells, like Mr. Ben says, you should go to Joop Stoep and tell him you're back, but he's like, no, I'm going to Miss Witherbury's house. And this is how the drama ends, and then just hy gaan na Nina toe om haar te laat weet dat hulle nie Boetie en Sissie is nie en dat hy op haar verlief is. So now he's going to Miss Witherbury's house because now he can tell Nina, we are not brother and sister, and he's going to tell her that he is in love with her. Okay, everyone, I hope this helps you. Sorry that it's quite a long one. It's a very important act. And ja, tot ziens allemaal.